Homeless veteran on trial. When judge hears his name, entire courtroom rises. Why would an entire courtroom suddenly rise for a homeless veteran on trial for trespassing? When the judge hears the defendant's name, Mason James Quinn, she stops the proceedings cold, revealing a stunning secret about his forgotten battlefield heroism and her deeply personal connection to him. Subscribe, like, and listen to the full, incredible story to find out what happened next. The air in Fairview Municipal Courtroom, 3 hung stale and heavy with the scent of cheap disinfectant and quiet desperation. It was Monday morning, arraignment day, a parade of minor offenses, shoplifting, disorderly conduct, expired tags. Presiding was Judge Olivia Parker, her expression professionally neutral as she processed the docket with practiced efficiency. Next case, a man shuffled forward, escorted by a bailiff. He was gaunt, his face obscured by a thick, untamed beard, his eyes downcast, radiating a weary resignation that felt older than his probable years. He wore layers of mismatched, ragged clothing despite the mild spring weather. The prosecutor droned through the charges. Criminal trespass, 3rd degree. Resisting arrest, passively. Defendant was found sleeping in the Elm Street Park Pavilion after hours. Refused initial commands to vacate. Judge Parker scanned the file briefly. Another homeless case, another symptom of the town's struggles with addiction, mental health, and poverty. Standard procedure. Defendant's name for the record? She asked, her pen poised. The bailiff leaned towards the microphone. Quinn, Mason James. Judge Parker's pen stopped mid-stroke. Her head snapped up. The professional neutrality vanished, replaced by an intense, almost startled focus. She stared at the disheveled man standing before her, truly seeing him for the first time. The set of his shoulders, the way he held his head, even when downcast, something pricked at her memory, sharp and insistent. "Mr. Quinn," she said, her voice suddenly tight, losing its usual measured cadence. "Could you please state your full name again for the court?" The man looked up, his eyes, hollowed by hardship but surprisingly clear, meeting hers for a fleeting moment. "Mason James Quinn, Your Honor," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse. Judge Parker's breath hitched. She gripped the edge of the bench, her knuckles turning white. The courtroom, usually filled with the low rustle of papers and coughs, fell utterly silent. Everyone, the bored prosecutor, the shuffling defendants waiting their turn, the court reporter, the bailiffs, sensed the sudden, inexplicable shift in the room's atmosphere. They watched as the judge continued to stare at the homeless man, a storm of unreadable emotion brewing in her eyes. What was happening? Who was this man? Judge Olivia Parker had presided over Fairview's municipal court for nearly a decade. At 48, she had earned a reputation for being fair, meticulous, and tough, but compassionate. She understood the community's fabric, its strengths and its fraying edges. She saw the opioid crisis reflected in the petty theft cases, the lack of mental health resources and the frequent flyers charged with public disturbance, the quiet desperation of poverty in the eviction hearings. She navigated these currents with judicial integrity, applying the law while occasionally finding leeway for diversion programs or community service when appropriate. But her connection to service ran deeper than her judicial role. Her younger brother, Daniel Parker, was a combat veteran, a Marine who had served 2 difficult tours in Afghanistan. Daniel had come home physically intact but carried invisible scars. The PTSD, the survivor's guilt, the struggle to reintegrate into a civilian world that felt alien after the crucible of war. Olivia had witnessed firsthand the VA's bureaucratic nightmares, the inadequate mental health support, the societal tendency to thank veterans for their service with platitudes while ignoring their ongoing battles. It fueled a quiet frustration within her, a sensitivity to the veterans who sometimes appeared lost and struggling in her courtroom. Mason Quinn, before the uniform came off and life unraveled, had been Sergeant Quinn, Force Reconnaissance Marine. Highly decorated for actions during his first tour in Iraq, he volunteered for a second in Afghanistan's volatile Helmand province. He was a natural leader, respected by his men, known for his calm under fire. But Helmand broke something in him. An IED attack wiped out half his squad, leaving him with a traumatic brain injury, severe PTSD, and a crushing weight of guilt for being one of the few survivors. Back home, the world felt wrong. Loud noises were explosions. Crowds triggered panic attacks. Sleep offered nightmares instead of rest. The VA offered sporadic counseling and medication that numbed him but didn't heal. His marriage crumbled under the strain. He lost his construction job after one too many flashbacks on site. Ashamed, adrift, and increasingly reliant on alcohol to silence the noise in his head, he drifted away from family and friends. His service medals lay forgotten in a box somewhere. His DD 214, proof of honorable service, became just another piece of paper lost in the shuffle as he moved from temporary shelters to park benches. He became one of the statistics, a homeless veteran, invisible to the society he had sworn to protect, his heroism overshadowed by his present hardship. He didn't seek help effectively. The system was overwhelming, and his pride, coupled with the debilitating effects of PTSD, kept him isolated. Getting arrested for sleeping in the park was just the latest indignity in a long, slow descent. He expected a fine he couldn't pay, maybe a few days in jail. He didn't expect to be recognized. He certainly didn't expect it from the judge on the bench. The silence in courtroom 3 stretched, thick with unspoken questions. Judge Parker kept her gaze locked on Mason Quinn, ignoring the confused stirring around her. "Mr. Quinn," she finally said, her voice regaining some composure but still laced with emotion. "You serve in Helmand Province, correct? 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." Mason shifted uncomfortably, seemed to shrink into himself. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, or just the weariness of being scrutinized. "Yes, ma'am," he mumbled. "A long time ago. Were you part of Operation Hammerstrike? Near Marja, summer of 2010. Judge Parker pressed gently. Mason nodded almost imperceptibly, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Yes." Judge Parker took a deep breath. Her next words stunned the courtroom into absolute silence. "My brother, Corporal Daniel Parker, served in that same battalion. He was pinned down during an ambush on July 14th, 2010. His position was overrun, communications were down, he was wounded. According to his letters, his official debrief, Sergeant Mason Quinn disregarded orders to fall back, charged through heavy enemy fire, suppressed the attackers, and dragged my brother and 2 other wounded Marines to safety before collapsing from his own injuries." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "Daniel is alive today, married with 2 children, because of you, Sergeant Quinn. He told me you refused medical evacuation until all your men were clear." Mason looked up sharply, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock, confusion, and perhaps the painful clarity of a memory violently unearthed. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The prosecutor cleared his throat awkwardly, shuffling papers. "Your Honor, while Mr. Quinn's service is commendable, the current charges are—" Judge Parker cut him off with a sharp look. "The current charges," she stated, her voice ringing with newfound authority, "are hereby dismissed. With prejudice." She stood up then, a move she rarely made during arraignments, her judicial robe settling around her. This court will not prosecute a man for the crime of homelessness when he is a decorated war hero who saved lives, including that of my own brother. The system has failed Sergeant Quinn. This community has failed him. We will not fail him further today." Her words hung in the air. Mason stared at her, his face a mask of conflicting emotions: disbelief, shame, maybe a glimmer of something long extinguished. His immediate reaction wasn't relief, but a kind of stunned paralysis. Judge Parker's initial goal was instantly clear: not just dismissal, but intervention. She turned to the lead bailiff, a stern man known to be a Navy veteran himself. "Bailiff Thompson, please escort Sergeant Quinn to my chambers immediately after this session concludes. And contact Mr. Henderson from the County Veterans Service Office. Tell him it's urgent." She then addressed the remaining docket, but the courtroom's atmosphere had irrevocably changed. The routine had been shattered by a revelation of forgotten heroism and systemic failure. The dismissal of charges was only the beginning. As Judge Parker continued rapidly through the remaining minor cases, a palpable energy filled the courtroom. Whispers spread. People looked at Mason Quinn differently now, not as a vagrant, but as the man the judge had called a hero. When Judge Parker finally called a recess, Bailiff Thompson approached Mason. Thompson, usually all business, offered a curt nod of respect. "Sergeant Quinn, this way, please," as Mason, still looking dazed, allowed himself to be led towards the judge's chambers. Something unexpected happened. A woman in the back row, perhaps the mother of another defendant, stood up and started clapping softly. Then another person joined, then another. Bailiff Thompson paused, looking back into the courtroom as the scattered applause grew. A young public defender stood, then an older clerk. Soon, almost the entire courtroom, spectators, court staff, even a couple of the police officers who had arrested Mason, were on their feet, their applause filling the staid room, a spontaneous wave of respect washing over the bewildered veteran. Mason stopped, looking overwhelmed, tears finally tracking paths through the grime on his cheeks. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. Judge Parker, watching from the doorway of her chambers, felt a surge of fierce satisfaction, quickly followed by resolve. This moment couldn't be fleeting. It had to lead to real change for Mason. Inside her chambers, with Mr. Henderson from the Veterans Service Office, VSO, hastily summoned and already present, the reality of the challenge became clear. Henderson, a dedicated but overworked advocate, listened intently as Judge Parker recounted what she knew of Mason's service and his current situation. "Judge, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention," Henderson said, pulling out a tablet. "Let's see what we have on Sergeant Quinn." He tapped into the VA database. The initial findings were frustratingly thin. Mason James Quinn, honorable discharge confirmed. Service dates matched. Basic benefits noted, but marked as inactive. No record of TBI diagnosis, limited PTSD treatment history, no pending disability claims. Crucially, there was no mention of the specific heroic action Judge Parker described, no record of medal nomination beyond his earlier awards from Iraq. "This happens too often," Henderson sighed. "Records get lost, commendations get downgraded or fall through the cracks during transfer, especially with battlefield chaos and TBI involved. He might be eligible for significant benefits, housing assistance, full medical, but we need documentation or sworn testimony to prove the service connection for his PTSD, the TBI, and certainly for any medal upgrade." The first complication was Mason himself. Exhausted and overwhelmed by the sudden attention and the resurfacing of traumatic memories, he was initially resistant. "I appreciate it, Judge, Mr. Henderson, but just let me go," he murmured. I'm used to managing on my own. Olivia understood the pride, the ingrained distrust of systems that had failed him. Mason, she said gently but firmly, let us help. You earned it. Daniel, my brother, he owes you his life. I owe you. The mention of Daniel seemed to reach him. He slowly agreed to let Henderson start the process, beginning with getting him into temporary housing at a local shelter that prioritized veterans and scheduling initial VA medical and mental health evaluations. But building trust would take time. Further complications arose quickly. The prosecutor, while respecting the judge's decision, privately expressed concern to the court administrator about the appearance of judicial bias given the personal connection. Henderson encountered bureaucratic roadblocks trying to expedite Mason's VA appointments. Retrieving military records proved slow and arduous. Judge Parker realized her initial act in the courtroom was just kicking down the door. Now came the hard work of navigating the maze behind it. Weeks turned into a month. Mason was in temporary housing, attending initial VA appointments, and slowly beginning to engage with Henderson and a PTSD counselor. Judge Parker kept tabs on his progress through Henderson, respecting Mason's privacy while ensuring the system didn't swallow him again. The local news story about the courtroom incident had generated sympathy, but also faded quickly, replaced by the next news cycle. The process of verifying Mason's heroic actions and correcting his record, however, hit a significant wall. Henderson managed to track down Mason's former commanding officer, now retired. The CO remembered Sergeant Quinn vividly. One of the best I ever served with, he stated in a phone call. But official records of the specific ambush were classified or frustratingly vague, and his own recommendation for a high honor for Quinn apparently never made it up the chain. Lost in the fog of war and personnel changes. Without corroborating witnesses or official documentation of the event beyond Daniel Parker's own testimony, which could be seen as biased, upgrading Mason's record or securing benefits specifically tied to that severe firefight seemed increasingly unlikely. The VA tentatively approved basic disability for PTSD based on his deployment history, but not at a level reflecting the severity linked to the specific trauma Judge Parker knew he'd endured. Furthermore, the TBI diagnosis remained elusive without clear incident documentation in his file. It felt like they were hitting a bureaucratic dead end. The midpoint arrived during a follow-up meeting in Judge Parker's chambers. Henderson laid out the frustrating lack of progress. Judge, without more concrete proof of that specific event, the kind that satisfies VA regulations, we're stalled on the higher-level benefits, the TBI claim, and any chance of medal reconsideration. Daniel's word, unfortunately, isn't enough on its own for the bureaucracy. Mason, cleaner now but still carrying a heavy weariness, slumped in his chair. Told you, he muttered, resignation clouding his eyes again. Systems broke. Judge Parker felt a familiar frustration boil over into steely resolve. She looked at Mason, truly looked at the hero hidden beneath the hardship, and thought of her brother's life, saved by this man's courage. Dismissing charges wasn't justice. Basic benefits weren't enough. Leaving his record incomplete, his heroism unacknowledged, was unacceptable. This was no longer just about helping one veteran. It was about fighting for the truth against an impersonal system designed to obstruct rather than support. This was her point of no return. No, Mason, she said, her voice firm, meeting his gaze. The system is broken, but we are not giving up. We will find the proof. We will get your record corrected. Your service, your sacrifice will be fully recognized. Her commitment deepened, shifting from passive support to active leadership. Her goal transformed. She would personally spearhead the effort to uncover the necessary evidence. Leveraging her position, her contacts, and her determination to cut through the red tape and force the military and VA bureaucracy to acknowledge the truth of Sergeant Mason Quinn's heroism. She wouldn't just advocate, she would fight. Judge Parker shifted into high gear, utilizing resources far beyond the reach of a typical VSO advocate. She reached out to a former law school classmate, now working as counsel for the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, explaining the situation and asking for assistance navigating the Pentagon's bureaucracy. She contacted her brother, Daniel, asking him to meticulously write down every detail he could recall about the ambush and Sergeant Quinn's actions, and to reach out to anyone else from their unit he was still in contact with. The response was initially slow. The senator's aide expressed sympathy but warned that correcting records retroactively, especially for medical considerations, was notoriously difficult. Daniel's outreach yielded frustrating results. Many from the unit were scattered, some still battling their own demons, others reluctant to dredge up painful memories. Bureaucratic inertia remained the biggest foe. VA departments requested forms in triplicate, cited obscure regulations, and shuffled Mason's file between departments. Judge Parker, however, was relentless. She made calls, wrote letters on her official judicial letterhead, carefully framing inquiries to avoid explicit bias while maximizing impact, and followed up persistently. She knew how to work within systems, even broken ones. Mr. Henderson, energized by the judge's determination, redoubled his own efforts, chasing down specific personnel files and medical records requests. Mason, witnessing Judge Parker's unwavering commitment, began to change. The spark of hope, ignited in the courtroom, slowly rekindled. He started opening up more in his therapy sessions, confronting the trauma he had suppressed for so long. He provided Henderson and Judge Parker with names, dates, and details he hadn't shared before. He even started tentatively attending a local veterans support group Henderson recommended. The process was grueling. There were setbacks. A crucial personnel file was reported lost in archives. A potential witness Daniel contacted initially agreed to help, then backed out, unwilling to engage with the military system again. Mason had bad days, retreating into silence, the weight of the past threatening to pull him back under. During one such period, Judge Parker visited him at the shelter, not as a judge, but simply as Daniel's sister. They talked for an hour, not about benefits or medals, but about service, loss, and the struggle to find peace. It was a turning point in their dynamic, solidifying Mason's trust. Judge Parker's new strategy involved focusing intensely on finding just one other verifiable witness to the specific ambush. If Daniel's testimony could be corroborated by one other soldier present, it would significantly strengthen the case for the Board for Correction of Naval Records, BCNR. She used military directories, social media, and veteran network forums, casting a wide net based on the unit information Mason provided. It felt like searching for a needle in a haystack, but she refused to give up. The breakthrough came via an unexpected route. A retired gunnery sergeant, formerly of their battalion's operations staff, saw a post Judge Parker had discreetly placed on a Marine Corps veterans forum. He remembered the chaotic reports from the ambush involving Daniel Parker's squad and Sergeant Quinn. While he wasn't present at the firefight, he did recall processing the initial, urgent field recommendation for a major award for Quinn, submitted by their captain immediately after the incident, a recommendation that subsequently vanished during a command transition. He offered to provide a sworn affidavit detailing his recollection of processing that initial lost commendation paperwork. This affidavit, while not eyewitness testimony of the event itself, was powerful bureaucratic evidence corroborating Daniel's account and suggesting the medal recommendation had existed. Armed with this new piece, Judge Parker and Henderson formally petitioned the BCNR for an expedited review of Mason Quinn's record, requesting correction of his file to reflect the events of July 14, 2010, eligibility for all related benefits, including TBI and enhanced PTSD disability, and consideration for the award originally recommended, likely the Navy Cross. The BCNR agreed to review the case, scheduling a remote hearing. The pressure intensified. Judge Parker, Henderson, and Daniel worked closely with Mason to prepare. Daniel prepared his formal testimony. The retired gunny provided his detailed affidavit. Henderson compiled all medical evaluations and therapy progress notes. The biggest challenge remained Mason himself. The prospect of the formal hearing, of having his trauma and heroism dissected by a board, triggered intense anxiety. He suffered setbacks, nightmares worsened, and he briefly considered withdrawing the petition. "Maybe it's better to just let it lie, Judge," he told her during a difficult meeting. "What does a medal matter now?" This was Mason's dark night of the soul. Judge Parker sat with him, not arguing, but listening. She reminded him gently that this wasn't just about a medal. It was about acknowledging the truth, about ensuring he received the lifelong care he was owed, and about honoring the sacrifice of the men who didn't make it back. "Your story matters, Mason," she said softly. "The truth matters." Her unwavering belief, coupled with support from his therapy group, helped pull him through. He agreed to participate in the hearing. The day before the BCNR remote hearing, Judge Parker reviewed the evidence package one last time. Everything hinged on this. It was the culmination of months of fighting, not just for Mason, but against the indifference that allowed heroes to fall through the cracks. Failure felt unthinkable. The BCNR hearing convened via secure video conference. Mason sat beside Mr. Henderson at the VSO office, Judge Parker observing remotely from her chambers. On screen, the board members, stern-faced senior military officers, and civilians listened impassively. Henderson presented the case methodically. The timeline, the newly discovered affidavit from the gunnery sergeant about the lost commendation, the corroborating medical evidence of TBI symptoms and severe PTSD. Then, Daniel Parker gave his testimony. His voice cracked with emotion as he recounted the ambush, the terror, the certainty he was going to die, and then Sergeant Quinn appearing through the smoke and chaos, laying down suppressive fire, dragging him and others to safety despite being hit himself. "He saved my life and the lives of 2 others that day, at incredible risk to his own," Daniel concluded, his gratitude palpable even through the screen. Finally, the presiding board member addressed Mason. "Sergeant Quinn, do you have anything you wish to add?" Mason hesitated, took a deep breath, and looked directly into the camera. "I just did my job, sir," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Did what any Marine would do for his brothers. That's all." The board deliberated privately. The wait felt agonizingly long. When they reconnected, the presiding officer's stern expression had softened slightly. Based on the compelling testimony of Corporal Parker, the supporting affidavit regarding the lost award recommendation, and the totality of the evidence presented, this board finds that Sergeant Mason James Quinn performed an act of extraordinary heroism on July 14, 2010. We approve the correction of his military record to reflect this action and the associated combat injuries. We further approve eligibility for all related benefits. Finally, we strongly recommend the posthumous awarding of the Navy Cross, subject to final approval by the Secretary of the Navy. A wave of stunned, emotional silence filled the VSO office, broken only by Henderson's quiet yes. Mason closed his eyes, tears escaping, relief washing over his face in a way Judge Parker hadn't seen before. Justice long delayed, had finally been rendered. The BCNR decision was a watershed moment. With his record corrected and full benefits approved, Mason's path forward changed dramatically. He gained access to specialized TBI treatment and intensive PTSD therapy through the VA, which made a significant difference. Henderson helped him secure a spot in a dedicated transitional housing program for veterans, and within 6 months, Mason used a HUD VSH voucher to move into his own small apartment. The Navy Cross was officially approved and awarded in a private ceremony attended by Judge Parker, Daniel and his family, Henderson, the retired gunny, and members of Mason's therapy group. Daniel Parker pinned the medal on Mason's chest, a moment heavy with shared history and mutual respect. Mason, though still quiet, began to reconnect with the world. He volunteered at the VSO, offering peer support to other struggling veterans, his own experiences giving him unique credibility. He started tentative contact with estranged family members. Judge Parker watched his progress with quiet pride, their connection evolving into a warm, respectful friendship. The story of the homeless veteran, the judge, and the courtroom that rose had a lasting impact on Fairview, sparking increased community support for veteran initiatives and prompting improvements in local VA outreach. Mason Quinn's journey from decorated sergeant to homeless defendant and back to recognized hero served as a stark reminder of the sacrifices made by veterans and the societal obligation to honor them not just with applause, but with tangible, unwavering support. He didn't just get his life back. He found a new purpose in helping others navigate the difficult road home.